Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning into the Eagles Talent Podcast. Today, I am here with keynote speaker, the founder of the worldwide social movement and nonprofit, Because I Said I Would, Alex Sheen. Alex, thanks for taking the time to sit down and chat with me.
Oh, no worries.
So, I want to start with something I read on your website, actually.
Sure.
I saw a really interesting quote. The promises we make and keep, and those we choose to dishonor, define us and the world. How do you think the promises that we make, even the most personal ones, affect the people around us?
I think the concept of a promise is something that kind of has layers to it. You look at even some people's first perception of like what do you think of when you think of a promise. Some people might say even like a pinky promise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is almost, it could be a meaningful thing, but it's almost like a childish thing, right? Like, oh, promise you make to kids. I've heard that feedback sometimes is that they think about commitments to children. But if you really just take one extra step in looking even in its dictionary definition of what the word promise means, a statement telling someone you'll definitely do something or something will certainly happen in the future, Merriam-Webster dictionary. That word future really, I think, embodies a lot and why promises define so much of even who we are, because the future and this connection to promises and what we say we're going to do is more or less how we're going to spend our time on this earth.
Right.
And how many of us just walk day to day, just running through either the same routine, not really thinking about the limited scope and the scarcity of time, or making promises that we don't actually end up keeping.
Right.
And that part of intent that we have, what we wanted the future to be, what we wanted the world to be, well, now that's gone with a broken promise. So at first, promises, I think, seem like not really all that deep, but it connects to so much of how much intent we're really going to bring to this world and what the future is going to be.
It's interesting that you say that, too. Even, the concept of like a pinky promise. Which seems somewhat almost like juvenile.
Yeah.
When I think of a promise, or not so much anymore, but for a while when I thought of the word promises, I thought immediately of like when you would say to your parents, but you promised, you said you would, but
right?
it's so much more than that. And it really does define us and who we are as human beings.
Yeah. And I think the word promise needs to be used outside of its scope of the actual word, meaning we should think about this thought of promise and commitment by its definition and not when we just say the word promise. Because the truth is, in your life and in even mine, the number of times I say, I promise I will do this is limited. But how often do you say, yeah, I'm going to do that. I will do that. A yes or no, even those one word could be a promise because you're agreeing to do something.
Right.
And you may not label it with promise, but that other person you're making that commitment to, they've attached that thought of a commitment to you. I mean, you said you were going to do it.
Yeah.
And to what level you said you were going to do it is sometimes arbitrary to the other person, right? Because they see, and we should see, all promises to have a little more equality than they normally do. Only the big promises matter? And the little promises we can break? I don't think most people feel that way, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think procrastination sometimes also gets the best of us. Like you said, getting caught up in the day-to-day routine of things that we lose scope of and just we lose sight of things that we promised to maybe ourselves even.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look at New Year's resolutions,
Right.
About 40% of all Americans make a New Year's resolution. Of that 40% that make one, about 8% of them actually keep their New Year's resolutions. And that's according to the University of Pennsylvania at Scranton. And maybe those numbers are accurate. Maybe they're a little off. But I think we all understand that these are not just promises to other people. These are promises to even ourselves. And when you look at that top 10 list of most common New Year's resolutions and these types of commitments, you're seeing pretty humanitarian and impactful things like losing weight, quitting smoking, learning another language, even traveling more to learn other cultures. I mean, there's these things, some of them seem just like fun, like maybe traveling is, but, quitting smoking decreases lung cancer rates. Taking care of our health reduces heart disease and adult onset diabetes. These things actually do matter, and the stakes are higher than a pinky promise.
That's interesting that you say that, because my mind didn't even go to New Year's resolutions, but that really is a promise that most people make, and
Oh yeah,
most people, and I'm guilty of it, we break them within the first maybe 3 weeks of the new year. So
yeah,
that's interesting that you bring that up. I do want to go back a little, 6
sure.
years ago, to maybe not the best time, but unfortunately you lost your father to his battle with small cell lung cancer. In giving his eulogy, you described your dad as a man of his word, saying, "I want to remember my father by the way he lived and by the promises he made." What was the most significant promise that he made to you, and how did it impact your life?
One of the things that was very significant to me, and maybe for selfish reasons, but we're all human, is my father said he would help me go to college, that he would help pay for it. And there was this point where, we were struggling to get that funding, and my mom wasn't able to pull her side of the equation. But I told my dad, was like, you need to come back home from college and go to a school that's more affordable, that you can live at home. I mean, this is a reality for a lot of families.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
like when I say selfishness, I mean, I should have been just privileged to have any education of any kind. But I missed my friends. I was playing lacrosse in school, and I said that thing that you said a little earlier, right? When a kid says, "But Dad, you promised,"
Right.
and the next day he said, "Well, I'll figure it out,"
Wow.
and he did. And it's, I mean, think about all the things that adds up for me. Like it meant I kept my friends. It meant I could play the sport I love. It meant that I could, maybe get a higher quality education. It changed the course of my entire life, that promise kept. But the truth is, it's all the promises that we make and keep that add up more. Because I don't really think you're a person of your word if you just keep one big promise. It doesn't mean that promise didn't matter. Of course it mattered. Right. It mattered incredibly. But my father was just an average person. We're not talking about some kind of war hero. He didn't write books. He didn't run marathons. And what I just said may not resonate with a lot of people because it's not climbing a mountain. But my father, he kept the promises that he made to me and to my brother. And too often these days people say things like, "I'll get to it," or "tomorrow." Well, I've learned that one day there is no tomorrow.
Right.
And that's why I do believe that keeping promises, they are so much of what makes up our character. And I think that was the best part of my father.
Absolutely. And I mean, what he did really altered the course of your life, because you were able to keep your friends, like you mentioned, and to stay in the environment that you stayed in, and he provided that for you. So to me, that's extraordinary.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, because I said it would sometimes resonates with audiences. Okay, let's be honest with each other. My father died of cancer. Okay, that is the second leading cause of death in the United States. It is an unfortunate reality that I could draw I'm not even going to say a mile circle. I'm going to say a 200-yard circle around myself right now, and we will find somebody else who has lost a parent, a husband, a wife, a child to cancer.
Right.
I think what makes this message unique is, and I don't even want it. It's the uniqueness is in the fact that it's not unique, in the fact that we all have someone that right now we can say to ourselves, "This is the most reliable person in my life, and this is the least reliable person in my life," and we can connect with promises very quickly. So it's a simple thought, straightforward in its message, because I said I would do what you say you're going to do. And I think that's why it connects with people, at least so far.
Yeah. And I think that your story connects with people because of the way that you lost your dad, because it's a reality for a lot of people, like you mentioned, that 200-yard circle. That's, I think, why people connect with your story, and also just what you've been able to do from that. You know, you took something that was painful and turned it into something that has impacted so many people for the better and changed so many people's lives, which is just, I mean, beyond extraordinary. So,
You know, there's this quote: "The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." You know, it's funny because, you know, motivational speakers or whatever, they like to say things like that.
mm-hmm.
You know, it's actually if you really look into the practice of making steel, there is actually a point where the fire gets too hot and it weakens the steel.
Really,
the
that's
quote
funny.
still sounds good, you know, so people use it, but really behind the spirit of that thought is what are we going to do in that moment when things aren't going right? You know, I mean, it's weird because we talk about it as if it was like some unpredictable thing. We talk about my father's death as if it wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, we're all going to die,
right?
And that might sound cold to some folks, but that's the hard truth.
It's reality.
And some hardship is coming for all of us. There's just no question about it. So to be surprised by it is a little weird, to be honest, because statistically it's going to happen.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we can't be emotionally impacted. Of course, that's only natural, right? But how are we going to use that moment to build a stronger version of ourselves? I think promises are often made in moments of hardship and tragedy, the loss of a loved one, the diagnosis of a disease, the recovery that may come with a mental health challenge, whatever it might be.
Right.
And so that the quote, it's a little off, but the spirit is there.
But it serves its purpose.
It does.
So early on, some of your promises that you made were to volunteer at a different nonprofit for 52 weeks.
Yeah.
You walked 245 miles across Ohio in 10 days. I know that people joined you on your walk across the state, and the media even picked it up.
Sure.
My question is, at what point did you realize the impact that this social movement had, and when did you decide, I want to turn this into a nonprofit?
Yeah, so there's this day at work because I said I was going viral, but I worked at a software company at this point because, you know, this thought of the promise card that really defines a lot of what we are, this thing that I introduced at my father's funeral, it wasn't paying for itself, meaning like we weren't getting enough donations to cover it. So I had to pay for it myself. And so this letter is set on my desk one day anonymously. I was like away from my desk, someone drops it off, and it says, "Hi, Alex. I've been following your blog because I said I would has really, really helped me through a rough patch. There have been lots of times where I didn't think life was worth living, and I almost took my life. Almost. I'm getting stronger every day, and a lot of that strength comes from a few promise cards I've written. I have lots of people who care about me. I'm a very, very lucky person. It took a lot for me to realize that I should be alive. I do have a purpose. I'm not sure if I would even be around if it wasn't for you and your organization. So thanks, Mr. Sheen. I know I'm supposed to write this on a card, but I want to promise you that I will not give up." And I can tell you that is verbatim what's said on that letter because I memorized every single one of those words. That, to me, the thought of writing a promise that says, "I will not kill myself." You know, put a 5-pound weight loss goal aside. I'm not saying it's not important to take your kids to the park when you say you're going to. It does matter. But when someone writes, "I will not kill myself," I'm not going to sit here and pretend like what we're doing is just some kind of show or something. It matters to people whether I want it to or not. The stakes sometimes are high. So I take this letter, I go into my boss's office, and I schedule this meeting with her, and I say, "Boss, before I have to do what I have to do," which she doesn't know, I'm about to quit my job. "If you could read this letter, it would make it a lot easier for me to say what I got to say right now." Because you'd just given me a promotion. Like I became the youngest manager in an enterprise, Fortune 100 best companies to work for in the United States. So I had to quit my job, but I didn't want to just say that. So I give her this letter and I say, well, read this first before I say what I have to say. And she unfolds it, reads what I just said to you, and she looks up at me and she says, Alex, this letter is from my daughter.
You are kidding me. That
And
is
and
crazy.
and I know that's a long-winded way to say it, but that's why I do what I do. That's why I quit my job. That's one of the many straws that added up to the reason why I'm so passionate about this message. That's
Right.
why 100% of my speaking engagement fees go to the charity. I make as much as a kindergarten teacher. I refuse to profit personally
Right.
off of the loss of my father, that 14-year-old girl who wrote that letter I just spoke of, the prisoners that are in our chapters who make promises to get better after the terrible mistakes they have made in society.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to use this as some kind of show. To me, it's very important that our charitable programs succeed, and the messages of our supporters' stories and what's been written on those 9.81 million promise cards. It's a privilege to share that on a stage, and that's why I don't ever mail it in. I care very deeply about what we do,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's just part of it.
I think that's another reason why your speeches, your talks are so captivating and relatable, because you're so passionate about the work that you do, and it comes across so
$1
clearly.
million of your money away every year,
Right.
And all your income, and you get pretty fiery.
Right. Right.
It's not like I know that money shouldn't be the focus of charity, but let's be honest with it. I know that people who might watch this, listen to this podcast kind of thing, they know that unfortunately money drives a lot of what we're able to do in helping others.
Mm-hmm.
That's what fuels our programs with schools, disadvantaged children, and all these different areas. But I don't think you can make certain sacrifices like that for what you believe in and not get a little worked up.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I have to ask, you mentioned it before, you went from software engineering to now all of a sudden you're running a nonprofit.
Yeah.
What was that first year like, that transition between the two?
Yeah, no. So I worked on the business side of that software company, and I was a corporate strategy lead in what they call the office of the CEO. And it was really hard, because you're talking about a $1 billion company,
Mm-hmm.
and you're also working directly with the CEO and the VP of strategy and things. You got resources, you got money to burn.
Mm-hmm.
That company made a compound annual growth rate of 25% every year since 2007.
Wow.
That's a 25% every year, not over the years, every year. And so you had resources. Now, flash forward to me starting, because I said I would, after my father passes. I'm literally like by myself in my family room,
Right.
And donations aren't coming in. I spent tens of thousands of dollars of my paychecks on sending these promise cards because I said I would, and it was really hard. But I think, I know people don't like to use the word hate.
Mm-hmm.
It's a powerful word. I get it. So I don't think it's terrible if it's used in the right way. But I hate hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been a hypocrite before, so it's hard to even say that, because we've all made our mistakes. But I hated this idea that I was going to tell all these people that they should write promises to change the world around them, but I was just going to give up.
Right.
Because what? Because a few months don't go right,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm all by myself. Because, but that's everything that everybody else that received those cards was going through too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel right saying things and not at least doing a reasonable amount. It's not like you have to give away the entire farm, but
Right.
I had to sacrifice and try to live up to the example that my father at least pushed over the domino on. And this movement carried on. So it was hard, but I got lucky. I worked hard, and our supporters' incredible generosity and determination have built this into a movement that has reached over 153 countries.
And your dedication too. You made the ultimate promise, the promise of all promises.
You know what's funny? Sorry, my camera stopped a little. I think the ultimate promise is actually what my girlfriend asks me for all the time, which is marriage. You know, I think that's really the ultimate promise. But let me get this camera.
Yeah.
You know how
that's the ultimate promise that you haven't that you're just not committed to yet.
No, it's hard. It's hard. That's I guess that's the interesting thing about commitments. It touches so many different parts of life, right?
Right.
You know, I know people who bring us to conferences, to their companies. You know, they are of course focused on these promises that we make every day, right? And as part of companies, and I focus our message more on the personal side of things, because that's where I think really change is made. Because a person of character doesn't treat situations differently. They don't say, I'm going to be honest here, but not here, but honest here. A true character value, when burrowed into the deepest parts of who we are and what we identify to be, that applies. And it's not about making a better employee or manager. It's about a better human being. And when you can reach people at that level and have them, make that change, I really do think that that's the most effective way to talk about these types of changes that I think some organizations are looking for. To be honest, I'm not in this for selling widgets or making salespeople better. I'll just be very blunt with that. I want to make the world a better place. I believe that people who keep their promises do make the world a better place, because the intent of human is good, and it's just whether or not we're going to actually follow through.
Absolutely. And it comes through. I mean, if you can save one person's life, you've made a huge impact on the world, and you've saved multiple lives. So
yeah. 1.7% of all Americans will die because of suicide. Okay, and
it's a startling statistic.
Yeah, what I do when I go and I speak, maybe I'm having a hard day, or I'm maybe in my own world of whatever first world problem I'm experiencing, I take the audience's number. Our average audience is about 850 people, and I just divide it by 100 to keep the math easy. And I say, okay, well, if you got 8 people out there that you have to try to convince,
right?
And no, you can't change everybody. And today maybe sucks for one reason or another, just because that's the way life is. But you have a job to do, and if you can help somebody on their path, even in this just little way, well, it's time to mic up and get to work.
Absolutely, that's a great mindset to have. Because I Said I Would is dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. One of the ways the organization helps to change people's lives is, like you mentioned, by sending out the promise cards. To date, you sent out close to 10 million promise cards by request only to over 150 countries, which is incredible, first of all. On an unconscious level, people, including myself, we make daily promises to ourselves that sometimes we don't commit to. What do you think it is about writing down a promise that holds such power over us?
Yeah, so there's a study by Dr. Gail Matthews, Dominican University of California. It's a pretty simple study. They just said, okay, set a 2-week goal and verbalize it, or set a 2-week goal and write it down. And then they had different test groups. So this was the control group, just say it. And then the different test groups were write it down. Another group wrote it down and checked in with other people. If you write it down, the goal attainment rates, according to that study, increased over 44%. Okay. Now, the question is why though? Like, why would goal attainment rates increase so dramatically simply by literally writing it down? Like, that's it. That was the only difference between the test and the control group. And really what it comes down to, I think, is just I literally mean human nature. Okay. So imagine 1,000 years ago, thousands of years ago, right? We are almost like a soft being, right? Like we're not actually that durable, okay? And so to survive in the wilderness, in the world, we need each other because you're a doctor and I'm a farmer and we like physically need each other to get all the things that add up to survival, right? So then imagine someone acts out in a small town, small village, whatever, right? Even primitively, think back to those days. You act out, you don't do what you say you're going to do. You create enough friction where they will banish you from the town. You can't be here anymore, right? What happens to those people? Well, there's a greater chance that you literally die off, right? Not every instance, of course, but you have less support. And so I think almost like it's ingrained in us to stay accountable to one another, almost at like a biological level. And because of that, when we write it down, when we share it with someone else, we are held accountable to something that is deeper than some superficial motivation. Does that make sense? It's like when you tell somebody else, when you write it down, when you give that card to somebody that says your promise on it, it's a layer that just coincides, I guess, with human nature.
Right. And I think on a certain level, even with the most personal of promises, when you write it down, it somehow becomes its own entity. And it's something that it's just, like you said, it's holding you accountable, and it becomes more than just you suddenly.
Yeah. And I think I'm not really one to focus on like magical parts of motivation, but some people say that, well, when you write it down, it brings it into the world. And I really like to focus habits and tactics and what we talk about more on scientific research and things. So saying bring it into the world is not enough for me. But what I will say is that at least that promise card creates an easier way to have a conversation. Because we, on average, say over 15,800 words a day, okay, according to the University of Arizona at Tucson. And if that's true, it's hard to enter sometimes conversation to bring up the seriousness of our words, because we just say stuff all the time, blah, 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 right? But when you say, no, like you write it on a card, you give it to someone, it's just almost like a more comfortable way to elevate that conversation to the seriousness of what promises really are. And that, I think, has been one of the reasons why the promise card has been so widely adopted.
Right. What I think is amazing is that recently you've taken your organization's message to the classroom.
Yeah.
You started, because I said I would, chapters in local schools.
Yep.
I found this so concerning, but I saw this statistic on your website that the National Institute of Health shared that only 29% to 45% of 6th to 12th graders reported they had social competencies such as empathy, decision-making, and conflict resolution skills, which I just find fascinating. Do you feel your chapters help improve this statistic in some way, and how so?
Yeah, I do. I do believe that. And I do think that there are a lot of social and emotional learning programs and content curriculum that can help push this forward. Because if we look at the last even 20, 30, 50 years of education in the United States, there has been a slow, obvious focus that is continuing to lean on passing a test, standardized testing. And listen, because I said it would, we're about accountability, right? We need to make sure that these kids understand what they've learned, and we need them to hold them accountable to test scores. It's not that I don't agree with the thought of a test, but it has become the point of such an extreme that our focus on reading, writing, math, science is really, like, those types of topics are all that we focus on. And then when you're in middle school and high school, other stuff that makes the type of person that we want to be around, right? People who are honest, people who have self-control, people hold themselves accountable. These lessons, they go to the wayside. Because yes, of course, reading, writing, math, science, that is all incredibly important. But if we don't teach our children how to be decent human beings to one another, tell me what the point of society is at all. And I'm going to be extreme in my statement, at least in our conversation. Nazis had great economies, great science, great jobs, okay, great trade. These things are important to stabilizing society, but that does not make society. We have to be good to one another,
Absolutely.
and we should never lose sight of that. And I think that it's an important part of what it means. I think that should be a part of not only just American education, but education around the world. It doesn't have to be the biggest part of the pie chart, but character education, character development, personal development, that is very important, I think, to the human experience, and it is critical to the success of the human race.
Absolutely. And like you said, science, math, all these core curriculums are so important. And we need them, but you can be the smartest person, but if you're a terrible human being, what does that stand for?
Exactly.
It's not,
and we just got to keep our eye on that. And I think all organizations have to think about that a little bit. Again, we are a charity. We're focused on humanitarianism, for-profit sector. And while I speak at obviously conferences all the time, that's just not where I'm at. But what I will say is that even in the for-profit field, how far are we leaning towards just shareholder wealth? The type of organizations that we work with realize that, yes, unfortunately, that's part of what it has to be to keep organizations afloat. But they very distinctively recognize that they want their employees to be more than some number or some bottom line. That if we're going to spend our time on at least this earth and we get one credit at it, then I think a lot of organizations are looking for all this time that their employees spend with them to be something more than $1.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're hoping to bring some of that humanitarianism into organizations.
And I think that organizations are starting to pick up on that. I mean, which is good. And I think that they're starting to see that specifically millennials and Generation Z, they are leaning towards organizations that...
What happens after Generation Z?
Oh, we just got Generation A, B, B, C, C. We just go back to the top. Back to the top. But I think they see that they're leaning towards organizations that have strong social responsibility, that they're looking to make a difference and not just put money in their wallet.
Yeah, and I feel that with the different... Sometimes you'll have events where it's like you want to appeal to the millennials, but then you also may have people in your industry or company that are more senior in their roles or in their career. And what I've seen, because I said I would have a fit in, is that our message, because of its viral growth in social media, it appeals to one side, but it's kind of an old school type of thought, right? Like, a handshake means something. Do what you say you're going to do. Talk is cheap. These are things that are hundreds of years old feeling. And so the combination of two, I think, has helped reach a broader span of folks, and why it's worked in different places that, honestly, sometimes I got surprised in the early days. I'm like, I hope this works here, because I'm in the Philippines and I don't know if they'll like this, or I'm speaking to kids, and then I speak to CEOs, and then I speak to, but I've been surprised by the fact that this is a universal message. It is also a message that I didn't come up with. Promises were here long before my father was ever born, and long after I go, it will still be a single measure of honor. And so I just got lucky and tapped into something that I believe people already believe in.
And I think it's a worldwide connection also because of the fact that you're relating to people on a human level, and it surpasses cultural boundaries and just any type of limitation. When you're connecting with someone like human to human, it doesn't matter what other connection there is, because we're talking about being a good person. Which is there's no language doesn't suppress that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious regarding your chapters at schools. Is this something that, if I'm a student in just a town in New Jersey, is this something like we contact because I said I would, or do you select these schools? How does that work?
Yeah, no. So we in the last 5 years, we've spoken to about 160,000 students in assemblies with me. It's about a third of our speaking work or
Hmm.
something like that. But often we'll speak to these schools and they're interested, and then they work with our vice president of chapters, our vice president of character education, and our staff here, because I said I would headquarters, to explore the possibility of chapters. We'll have 7 chapters in the beginning of next year, and then
Wow.
7 high school chapters, and then 1 chapter in a prison that I mentioned earlier. And
Wow.
then we're looking actually starting chapters in Panama City, Panama. So that would be our first chapter in Central America. But when we work with schools, whether we can do that structured programming
Hmm.
where we have a chapter of kids who go and volunteer, make promises to help others, and work on personal development through workshops, whether it's something super structured like that and they're working with us directly, or just using our materials and embedding it into their own programs, whether that's Boy Scouts or Boys and Girls Club of America. There's a lot of other leadership initiatives that are looking for personal development, character education content that we can help support them with. So I encourage anybody who's in that field or may have kids who are working through programs like that to check out becauseisaidawould.com and our resources that are freely available to
Hmm.
them.
And what's great about your presentations, especially in the school setting, is that people can take, like you said, bits and pieces of it and apply it to themselves, their lives, maybe their schoolwork, whether
Yeah,
it's just making a promise and holding yourself accountable or something deeper than that. So
yeah.
it
I,
really
I
applies
feel
to schools.
I feel like in the school environment, we often hope that you know technology advances, learning gets better, teachers are going to be there for the right reasons, parents are going to do their role. But you go to a school where it's 100% free and reduced lunch. That means every single kid is under poverty.
Hmm.
The truth is, in many of these cases, um, there's no cavalry coming. Okay, they're going to have to
Right.
do it all by themselves. And when we teach concepts like self-control, honesty, accountability through our chapter programs or other character education materials, we are equipping children to not just be better at math or any one thing. We're giving them the self-control to be better at everything,
Hmm.
to bear down and just really work through the unfortunate challenges that they will have to endure.
Absolutely. 2 of your speaking programs are, well, one of them is Accountability in the Workplace. The other is the Life of a Promise program. Can you just kind of briefly explain what these programs are, how they apply to different audiences?
Yeah, and I think maybe a better phrase for the first one is just the importance of a promise.
Hmm.
And I know that's not flashy, but that's what it is. I think a lot of folks recognize that people don't keep their promises,
Hmm.
and the world would be a very interesting place if people just did what they said they were going to do. I feel like organizations that resonates, and really, my first program, my keynote is centered around more of that motivational, inspirational side of things. Um, it's not this you can do anything type of mentality. I really am not that way. I I believe though that we can do what we say we're going to do.
Hmm.
That so often our promises are they are within our reach, and it is just about the hard work that's going to take to get there. So if an organization believes that their folks would benefit from really valuing this thought of follow through and accountability, and through the stories of our supporters and this inspirational lens, that's really what my keynote is about. Now on the workshop side, it's a little different, and I may have even said it in the beginning of our conversation, but the simple thought, keep a promise, right? People like it because it's straightforward, but uh, you know, if keeping promises was so easy, then everybody would do it,
Right.
and they don't, because it does take a lot of habits and tactics to actually keep promises, and that's what my workshop is about. Not the inspirational side,
Hmm.
like the keynote, but it's about the habits and tactics, the research. I mean, I mentioned one
Hmm.
study or a couple today, but how do I manage my time? Because if you manage your time, you'll be better at keeping promises. Psychology of self-control, word choice and communication. There are many
Hmm.
different topics that add up to what it takes to be a person of your word.
Right.
And that's what my workshop is. I can do it in different ways to fit in a 45 or 60-minute slot. I've done half-day workshops too. The fortunate thing is with our staff of 20 full-time employees here at Because I Said I Would, this is not just me getting up there and saying whatever. We really have people developing content, videos, things that are great assets for these experiences with smaller groups, and I, again, continue to focus it on that personal side of making sure that when they leave that room, it's more of a core value than a value at work.
Absolutely.
Because I want to make sure that it sticks in a deeper way. And so that's the difference, the inspirational side of the keynote, and then really habits and tactics with the workshop.
And to all of our listeners and viewers, I encourage you to go listen and check out Alex's TED Talks, which I'm sure you have maybe listened to it because there's millions of views. But it really is. It's a little taste of what it is that you offer in your presentations and what you bring to the table, and they're so inspiring and just overall amazing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate so much the opportunity to come share the message here. And I'm really excited just because our book is coming out for the first time. It's been 6 years since my father passed away. And I decided it was time to share the message through that medium. I'm really excited at the thousands of copies we've pre-sold and the January 1st release. That really ties in with the New Year's resolution, right? So
well, I was actually just going to ask you about your book because normally when we wrap up a podcast, we say, "What's next for?" Say, "What's next for Alex Sheen?" But Alex Sheen has so much coming up. You have your mobile app, you have the Museum of Promise, your upcoming book, as you mentioned. Tell me about these projects.
Well, yeah. So some of them are visions of hopeful things that we've got interesting ideas like the museum and the mobile app. But our podcast is coming out in January. These are the stories of our supporters that are incredibly moving because I hopefully do a decent job at sharing our message. But to hear it straight from the people who are making these promises, it's another level. And I think that's kind of a fun way for even events. It doesn't have to just be a flash in the pan. There's other content on our website and things that people could stay involved with. And the podcast is one of those extra things that we've created. It's coming out in January. And then the book, of course, is a collection of short stories about our supporters and their incredible promises. I mean, there's even folks in this book that literally, like the Today Show is hounding them to be like, please share your story with us, and they're like, I really would rather you just talk to me because I said I would. And the reason why I say that is just because I want to make sure that we as an organization are honoring and respecting the seriousness of what our supporters have given us. These stories are
people's lives.
They're ridiculous. I mean, I would love to say that I'm just like a good speaker and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, it's like there's the camera again. That's like a bit in this whole.
It's amazing. We'll make it like a drinking game.
Yeah. That's I would love to say that it's me and my delivery. It's not. It's you have enough stories like that, and it's incredible. So it's been awesome to put it into the book, and then for 100% of those proceeds also to go to the charity and some of the programming that we've talked about and other programs we haven't been able to talk about. It's awesome to see that happen, and we just really appreciate the organizations who are getting pre-orders for their events and then using that as something to carry on this message, not only with their audience members but their families too. They bring that message home, and I think that's another way to make sure that it sticks.
Absolutely. That is amazing. You are amazing. And by the way, the podcast such a good direction for you. I feel like you're perfect for that.
Well, it's weird because I don't actually talk that much on our podcast.
Really?
I know this sounds weird, but I've always felt strange about like being this person in the spotlight because that's what people ask me to do, right? Oh, Alex, do a reality show and all this nonsense. And even in podcasts, they want me to just ramble or so. I don't know. How somewhere. But I'm telling you, I am certain this is not like some kind of gimmicky thing that I'm saying. our supporter stories are stronger than whatever it is I have to say. In fact, if there's anything enlightening that I have mentioned in the last half hour, 46 minutes, whatever it's been, it probably came from a supporter. It probably came from their perspective. That's the only reason I have any idea of what to say is because they shared with me their stories after serving 20 tours in the Middle East. They've shared their promises after their 11th month old was shaken as a baby and the legislation they changed in their state. The promises that these people are making have shaped what I know. And I'd rather people just hear those stories directly and learn from them than always talk about, whatever it is some one single dude has done. So
I don't think you give yourself enough credit though. Because you're it's what you talk about is rooted in these people's stories, and that's what makes it so compelling. But you are also so passionate about what you do and this organization and this movement, and these stories are what pushes it forward. But you're spearheading this movement and killing it.
Yeah, but we can't let my head get too big, man. No. Right? I got 20 plus staff members over here making sure that I stay humble. So we gotta. No, I appreciate you saying that. I'm just kidding. I really do appreciate you saying that, and I hope I do bring something to events, and I thank you for just your time.
Absolutely, thank you. Last bonus question, since you brought it up, would you ever do a reality show if it was pitched the right way, focusing on the stories?
It's weird because I was fiercely adverse to this in the beginning, just because my father had just passed away. And my aunt actually works at a pretty high level in reality shows on the human resources side. So she staffs all the production crews and stuff for some of these, bigger things. And she's like, Alex, it's not real,
Right.
It's not real. And that from watching it. She's like, it really isn't. Like there's a lot of manufacturing going on behind the scenes. And I just want to make sure whatever mediums we're selecting, it's authentic, because once we lose that, we lose everything. Like I'll give you another example. Like I speak to a lot of companies and things, and understandably they want to co-brand or sponsor or, hey, we'll even give you some funding and put a banner on our website. Things that are very common actually in the United States and across the world in giving. But I don't want that 14-year-old girl who cuts themselves to go to our website and just see some brand. I want it to just be what it is.
You want it to be organic.
I understand that there should be an appreciation for corporate giving. I get that. I get it. I understand why. And I do not look down at all on other nonprofits who have to do that in order to get the job done. It's a means to an end. I understand. And companies are genuinely doing a good thing. So a little recognition isn't terrible either. So I'm not trying to be too judgmental here. I just don't want, because I said it, to become something that is just plastered with other stuff. I just want us to be what we are.
Right.
I sometimes just want society to have things that are like that. It just is what it is, and that's it. And I don't know if I'm doing a good job of that entirely.
I think you are.
I know I'm trying, and that's why I really appreciate the type of organizations that work with us that realize that this is not something that's for sale. This is not going to be watered down by something. If you're looking for a message that just is what it is, and there's no other motive, and your audience members are looking for that type of thing, then that's what I got. What I don't have is messages that are tailored specifically to an industry and a segment. I've got something that resonates with human beings and that I've seen work and hopefully change lives in at least the ways that we can. And that's what I'm prepared to deliver.
And that is so admirable. So
thank you so much.
Everyone, go check out Alex Sheen's page on Eagles Town.
This guy, by the way. He's saying things voluntarily. We'll just break the fourth wall right here.
Oh, yeah. There's no sponsorship here. But go check out Alex Sheen's page on eaglestalent.com. Check out BecauseISaidIwould.com. Keep an eye out for the upcoming book, January 1st, you said.
Yes, January 1st.
Also,
It'll
stay
be
tuned.
available in about 250 Barnes & Noble stores. It's available for pre-order now on becauseitsaidwould.com/the-book or on Amazon.
So no excuse. You heard it. Go get it.
Awesome.
And keep an eye out for the podcast. What is it? Because I Said I Would?
Yeah, it's just going to be becauseitsaidwould.com. You'll check it out there. It'll be an 8-episode series. When we release in January, 3 episodes will come out all at once, so you can binge a little bit.
Alex, of course, speaks to all organizations, but I highly, highly recommend if you are a school, you're going to want your students to listen to Alex Sheen. I wish that someone had come and spoken to my class and shared the stories that you have. So thank you again for taking the time to sit down and chat with us. I know that you are very, very busy. So everyone,
No, I just play games mostly.
Is that a pinball machine?
It's actually a pachinko machine. It was cluttering my house, and I felt like it could clutter the office instead. So
it's good background visuals.
It makes me look like a millennial. Like
you're technically a millennial.
That's true. I feel like 130 years old though. But anyways.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to check out Alex Sheen.